Burj Khalifa is 160 stories high, but sadly is in Dubai. So I headed down to the gym to climb that height on the Stairmaster. Now I know what you're thinking, this can't be nearly as hard, but I'll prove to you what I did is even harder and a lot more interesting. So because of the current travel restrictions, I set out to climb 160 floors as fast as possible. And I could almost guarantee you're not going to expect what happened. My first strategy was to turn it up all the way to the max. I figured going as fast as possible would obviously help me get it done fast, but that's where I made my first mistake because it was much harder than I thought. I started sweating a lot, but I pushed through the pain, and by the 3.5 minute mark, I'd done almost 30 floors. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up this pace for long, but I told myself that no matter what, I'd keep going. Worst case scenario, I'd turn the pace down, but I wasn't going to stop until I completed. I had an idea start to form, and I kept pushing on. I was starting to slow down, and I was sweating everywhere, but I'd passed the halfway point.
It's been almost 14 minutes, and we're almost at 100 floors. 60 more to go.
And at this point, I checked my heart rate for the first time. This is where I noticed it was consistently well over 200 beats per minute. Going at this rate, it's hard to make your body last for a long time, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other. I was still making really good progress and going as fast as I could. I was sweating a ton, but I was almost at my final goal. And you'll see in a second here, this is where things start to get really interesting. When you know you're almost at the end, your body does something really weird where it's really hard to keep going. But despite this, I completed 160 floors in just under 24 minutes, then made a decision.
I just did 160. I'm gonna keep going.
After 24 minutes, I decided to just keep going. I wasn't sure for how long, but I just figured I'd go until something happened. Not sure what it would be. It continued to get harder, but I continued to tell myself that I wouldn't get off. Rather, I'd find ways to distract my mind to keep my body going. At one point, I even turned on a Mr. Beast video so I wouldn't feel alone in this challenge. And this is where you start to see the true potential that everyone has. And this is more interesting than you think. I started this challenge with the goal to go only 160 floors. But if you've never pushed yourself to an absolutely crazy limit beyond what you think is possible, let me explain what happened. I've noticed this pretty consistently in the challenges that I did. It always starts out easy. Depending on what you're doing, maybe it takes a few seconds or a few minutes right at the beginning where you feel like you can keep going forever. And then reality sets in, where you realize how hard the challenge truly is. Now by this point, I'd already gone an hour, which was longer than I'd ever been on a Stairmaster. But of course, despite the pain and the ridiculous amount of sweating, I still wanted to keep going.
Bro, I'm literally drowning. There's so much sweat going in my nose.
By the 1 hour mark, I had gone 375 floors, which is more than double what the tallest tower in the world is. And as you can see here, I'm actually having to reset the machine because the maximum time it can handle is an hour. And I decided to keep going, so I got my friend Paul to go out and get me some carbs to keep my body running, because I was about to push through a lot of things that I didn't see coming. And this way, although there'll still be a lot of pain, at least I'll have some energy to keep me going. Now let's get back to what happens during these challenges for a second, because we know, like everything, at first it's easy and then it gets really hard. But then something interesting happens. It doesn't get easier, but you notice your body begins to adapt. Time all of a sudden seems to fly by a lot quicker, and you lose memory of what just happened. I would look down and feel the excruciating pain that I was in, but for the past 3 hours, it's like I've been in a coma and didn't have any memory of it. And at this point, you realize your body's able to push a lot further than you think.
Like a ton of sweat in my eyes. It really hurts.
For several hours, my heart had been beating at a rate of 180 beats per minute, which is really high, and I was starting to feel it, but I wanted to push myself even further. By this point, I'd gone around 5 hours, which was longer than I ever thought possible. The amount of calories burned and floors climbed was insane, and I finally finished with a time of just over 6 hours. Now, before I tell you how many floors I climbed, I want to finish explaining how my body gets through these, because as you saw earlier, I was exhausted by climbing just the tallest building in the world. But there's always a lot more in you than you think, and once you get to that initial point of resistance where you feel like you can't go anymore, that's where you need to push through in order to fully reach your potential, where your mind shuts off and you surrender to the suffering that you're in. And as you can see, you can go a lot longer than you think before that second point of resistance comes in, which usually is your signal to stop. In total, I climbed 1,766 floors, which is over 10 times what I set out to do. And in total, I burned over 3,500 calories in just a 6 hour window.